Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, is the UK safer in or out of the European Union? It's one of the central questions in the referendum debate ahead of that vote on June the 23rd. Does membership help protect us against terrorist attacks or make them easier to commit? And are the big foreign policy challenges, those posed by Russia or Iran, better tackled through the EU or with other international partners alone? Here's the Prime Minister giving his view earlier in the week.
We draw our strength as a country, obviously, from the fact we're the fifth biggest economy in the world. We've got a special relationship with the United States. We're members of NATO. We're members of the G7. But we also get some strength from being in the European Union, the organisation for our continent, that actually helps us, whether it's confronting Iran and making sure we don't have an Iranian nuclear weapon, whether it's standing up to Putin and his aggression in Ukraine. We are stronger by being part of this organisation.
And I'm joined now by a member of the Cameron government, the Armed Forces Minister, Penny Mordaunt. She's campaigning for Britain to vote to leave the EU. Welcome to the programme. Now, the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, 12 former British defence chiefs all say our security is enhanced by remaining in the EU. What do you know that they don't?
Well, those are job titles, they're not arguments. I'm very clear from my experience, having worn a uniform, doing the job I do, 3 years on the House of Commons Defence Committee, being an aid worker in the former Eastern Bloc, that we will be safer, far safer, outside of the EU.
But they're responsible for our security. They may have job titles. One of them's your boss. That's his title. They think they're responsible for our security and they think we're safer in.
Well, there's a lot of things we do agree on. We agree that NATO, for example, is the cornerstone of our defence, but that the EU defence structures complement that. If we were outside of the EU, we wouldn't lose anything from those structures. The common European defence policy and the procurement opportunities, the opportunities to partake in missions, are open to non-EU member states and NATO. So we don't lose anything by leaving.
Well,
and I think we would gain massively the ability to take back control of our borders, just being one example, if we were outside.
Well, we'll come on to some of that, but let's just take this issue of what we would lose. The Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon, you're in his department. He's a Eurosceptic. He's not known for being a Europhile. He says if we left the EU, it would be smaller and weaker, which is precisely what President Putin wants. He wants the EU to be smaller and weaker. You can't deny that, can you?
The key issue here is what is the operational benefit that being in the European Union or taking part in any of the defence structures and security structures that it plans on setting up, like a pan-European intelligence agency, what is the operational benefit of that? I would argue that there is none, and in fact it frustrates our ability to share intelligence. We don't share intelligence with pan-European agencies. We share intelligence with other nations.
But I didn't ask you about sharing intelligence, and I didn't ask you about operational matters. Very important these are. I asked you a geopolitical question. That your boss says the EU would be smaller and weaker if we left, and that's precisely what the Kremlin wants.
Well,
do you deny that?
2 points. First of all, in a time of austerity, when we're facing massive terrorist threats, if we are spending time, money and energy on anything that doesn't give us an operational advantage and a benefit in tackling those threats, I think that's crazy.
But do you deny that it would leave us smaller and weaker, and that's what Mr. Putin wants?
No, absolutely not. The thing that will stop any malicious ambitions that Putin or anyone else has against us, the Ukraine, other member states of the European Union, is the success, the economic prosperity, the national security of those nation states. That's what will halt the threat that we're facing from Putin and elsewhere.
Well, the Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, who may also be thought to know about such things, he says it's only our enemies like President Putin who want us to leave the EU. Can you name a single ally with which we have intelligence and security cooperation that wants us to leave?
Well, I think I can. I mean, there are
Which one?
People have different views in different nations. But let's just take our strongest ally, the United States, for example.
They want us to stay.
Well, that is what Obama has said. That is what he is coming over to campaign on. But I would argue very strongly, and I know there are many people in the US that that would agree with me, the former head of the CIA being one, is that we are that things that the European Union is requiring of us are frustrating our alliance with the United States.
You can't deny that America, the official policy of America under Republican and Democratic presidents, has been that we should stay in the EU. That's just a factual statement.
Well, that is their view, but it's not an argument. I would, if
I
President
asked you
Obama
if you
were
could
here...
name a major or even a minor ally that we have that wants us to leave.
Well, I mean, I've mentioned the United States. The people have different views.
But they want us to stay.
People have different views.
Give me an ally that wants us to leave. Australia? New Zealand? Canada?
Our key
France?
intelligence
Germany?
relationships are with the Five Eyes. They fully understand that our relationship with them, the intelligence relationships we have with them, are threatened by legislation and requirements that the EU is placing on
The
us.
Five Eyes, which is the most sophisticated intelligence alliance in the world, involves Britain, America, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Each one of these Five Eyes, or the other four of the five that we're not, they want us to stay.
Well, I think that they're wrong. I think that the relationship that we have with them will be jeopardised and will be further jeopardised when we set up European...
Think so.
Well, that's their view, but it's not mine. I think their view must be...
And you mentioned NATO earlier. The General Secretary of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, he says a strong EU with a strong Britain is good for NATO. The head of the US Army in Europe says leaving could weaken NATO.
No, there are people that will argue that NATO is undermined by the EU structures.
Not the head of NATO.
I don't think that. I think that the EU defence structures that we have do complement it, but they are not closed off to us by leaving. And the key issue about the threats that we're facing, the threats that come, for example, with free movement of people and also that come with civil unrest on the continent will be resolved by us leaving, by taking back control of our borders, our laws and our money. And also kick-starting reform in the EU itself.
All the parties that want us to leave in Europe, they're all protectionist, xenophobic, authoritarian, against the single market. And they hope that by us leaving, there'll be kind of chaos in Europe. Is that the kind of chaos on our doorstep that would be good for our security?
I think that Putin, you've mentioned earlier, I think that the rise of far-right organisations in Europe, as a consequence, by the way, of the forced harmonisation, the euro and the austerity and the problems that is bringing to member states, they have their arguments. They're
on your side.
But they're not on my side. They are mistaken. What will ensure that those malicious ambitions against us are thwarted is if we have strong nation states. That is not what Europe is currently delivering. It's delivering weak states, states that don't have the money to put into
but it could be even
their
weaker
defence.
if we were to leave. But forget the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, the head of NATO, the head of the US Army in Europe, all of our major allies, starting with America, all think we're more secure, and they'd be more secure if we stay in. And you, a junior minister in the Defence Department, say they're wrong. You have to square that
Well,
for
if they were all lined up in front of me, what I would say to them is that freedom is never a gamble. We have gambled a huge amount in the past to preserve our freedom. We risk nothing by trying to take it back. If we take back control of our borders, we've got free movement of people with all of the risk that brings. Let me just give you one practical example.
I'm glad, because we're running out of time. Let me come on. In what way would being outside the EU make it easier for us to stop terrorists coming in?
So currently, Europol estimate we have about 5,000 Daesh-trained fighters that have returned to Europe. Currently, unless we have concrete intelligence, we may have suspicions about an individual coming to our shores. We can't turn them back. If they have an EU passport,
if we left either? Are you saying that they'd need that other Europeans would now need a visa to come to this country?
No, I'm not saying
so how
that.
would you
I'm
stop
saying
someone
that
with
we
an
would,
EU passport coming in?
we would be able to have control. Currently, we don't. We don't have those options.
If we have suspicions on somebody, we can stop them coming in. We stop over 500 a year coming in.
No, that's
we
not
do.
correct. That's not correct. No, we stop about 6,000 people currently
Yeah,
from
but
the EU.
on matters of security issues or public danger, we stop around 500 a year. We can do that now, whether they've got an EU passport or not.
If we have suspicions about someone but sketchy intelligence, we cannot prevent them from coming in.
But we couldn't do that unless you have a visa system for France and Germany. You couldn't do it.
That's just one example of why we would be safer. We risk nothing by taking back control of our borders and our laws that underpin this framework. It's not a gamble. Staying in is a gamble because this is only going to get worse. We have to take back control. That is what is required to keep our nation safe.
Has the controversy swirling around the Prime Minister as a result of the Panama Papers, has it damaged his credibility as leader of the Remain campaign?
I don't think it's damaged his credibility. I don't have any other inside scoop other than you do, but I don't think he has done anything wrong. I think what this is about is trust, and he has to now demonstrate and build up that trust and rapport with the general public. I think that this will raise questions, as your panel said earlier, about politicians publishing further information about themselves. And I think, although I understand arguments around privacy and security, if that is what the electorate require of their elected officials, I think that's what will have to happen.
Okay. Penny Mordaunt, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.